Welcome to our Worried About Nothing podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the recent Outer Shadows documentary that just came out a few days ago. That's now, I think at the last count, had 5 million or something views. So we thought we'd just get together and have a little conversation about it.
Yay! Well, I can say for me, I'm really excited that a video like this has so many views because I've been waiting for a lot of people to be interested in this kind of information. Granted, I've only been waiting about a year compared to other people who have been waiting like decades, but I'm really excited.
I'm very excited too. And I think you've seen the recent ad posted by Microsoft, how many dislikes there were and only a few likes, and they had to put it down. So it was like, yay, people are awakening. Look at that. They're more and more interested in what's true, and they're less trusting in real media news, which is really exciting to see.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a turn. It was so funny that you mentioned the Microsoft ad because people are posting all over social media about that. And it's quite funny because they're deleting all the negative comments, but they just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. There's definitely a shift. People are starting to think outside of the mainstream media guidelines, as it were. But I think it's great, this documentary, because for those of us who are relatively new, like myself, I haven't been following this for years and years and years, like some people have. It's such a good introduction because it's succinct and it touches on a lot of different topics, but it doesn't kind of dive in too deeply like some of the other videos and documentaries I've seen. So it's a really good first eye-opening, as it were, to a lot of the topics that are covered.
And I like that they use the lady that is talking, right? They proclaim her insane, but I really like that she has all this background and she's a real journalist. So she's really the one who is looking for facts and she's the one checking all the facts. And you can see all her pictures with all the, with all main people, so you can see that she was well respected, and then magically she started posting on something different, something they disapproved, and they didn't like it, so they decided that she was insane. But you can totally see that she's normal, she's just giving you the facts. So that was really, really good to see that she's the one who is checking the facts, and she has been training on that, so it's really exciting to see that.
Yeah, I think that she was a really good example of how the topic they were talking about was demonstrated, in the media, the mass mind control by the media to try and make her seem insane, to try and make her seem like she's crazy, doesn't know what she's talking about. And it just shows how, like they were talking about in the documentary, how the conditioning that we have for years, since birth, really, since we start watching TV, even cartoons, listening to the radio, whatever it is, how everything is just subliminal messaging, constantly. And we become so programmed to just believe it without question, without thought. And like you see in that documentary and in others, when they demonstrate all of the subliminal messaging, like in some of the Disney cartoons, there's so much that you wouldn't even notice, but that's being absorbed by your subconscious constantly. And it just really shows how easy it is to control the mass population, because we see it as entertainment. And that was another fascinating thing when he was talking about that. The entertainment and the television and programming and channels, all the terminology that's used is all about mind control and subliminal messaging and spells and all of that kind of thing that we just take for granted. We don't even think about it. But it's so true. You speak to people and you say, well, what program is that on? Or what channel is that on?
Yeah, because we don't think about the origin of the words that way. So that was kind of cool, like how he went through kind of the history of it a little bit, of the terminology they use, like with Hollywood and stuff like that. I was just like, wow. And they were saying that they would call on like mediums and stuff like that so that they could then express their spells through channels. So I found it interesting because he used the word medium, and I was like, medium, media. Like it's amazing.
Exactly, yeah. And it was interesting as well, the way he was talking about how all these huge celebrities, whether it be pop stars or sports personalities, whatever it is, aren't allowed to have that level of popularity unless they can be controlled. And it's true with some people, they do seem to kind of come out of nowhere. You know, they explode into this massive popular scene.
Yeah. Well, because you also have the people who come out of nowhere and then they disappear. So it's like, well, were they the ones that decided not to move forward with the agenda? They're like, oh, no, thanks.
Yeah, true. And you do hear about those. I mean, like, for example, they mentioned or they showed a clip of Elijah Wood. And I remember listening to an interview or reading an interview with him a few years ago. And he was talking about Hollywood being full of paedophiles. And it was really shocking at the time because I'd not heard anything else about that at all before. And then suddenly you just stopped seeing him anywhere. He didn't seem to appear in films, or maybe he has, but I'm just not aware of it. But it seems that some people speak out, and like they were talking about in the documentary, some people that were speaking out that have made very clear name-calling videos have suddenly accidentally died or been got rid of somehow. And it's all just a real dive into what you would think of as fiction, you know. And that was another point that was raised in the documentary that I found interesting, was that a lot of it is displayed and portrayed in films, but very often they're either comedies, so you don't take them seriously, or they're science fiction. And by the very title, fiction, it immediately plants in your mind that this is not true, it's just a fantasy, it's a story. So they're kind of doing it in plain sight in a way, but people are just assuming that it's entertainment. Whereas I think the shocking thing is kind of bringing that into real life, as it were, and seeing that it's actually happening, but right in front of your eyes. So it's not even really hidden, but it's happening. But because we have so many assumptions and so much programming, we don't even see it.
And I still think that even after watching this movie, some people may not believe it to be true. Some people may still continue denying this. And it's their choice, right? But it's really exciting to see how many people are watching. Yay!
Yeah, definitely. And I think it'll maybe take more and more viewings and seeings and more evidence for people to start believing, because people don't necessarily want to believe because it's scary stuff. The fact that this is all true, and I believe it is true, turns everything that you know and you've been conditioned to believe on its head. And the deeper you dive into it, the more things come up that you wouldn't necessarily even believe people were capable of.
No, and this is something really hard to believe, because you want to believe in good in people. Why do you want to see evil in them, right? So I can totally understand how it can be really hard to accept as truth.
Yeah. But it is so good. And I think those people that are at the forefront, you know, people like Liz and like the people in the documentary, and people like Janet Ossabard, who did that 10-part series, The Fall of the Cabal, we can post a link maybe under the video, are really on the forefront there, and they're sticking their necks out. And like they said in this documentary, you know, Liz was vilified and mocked, and her life was destroyed in a way, in many ways, because of speaking this truth. And that's why it takes more and more people to stand up and speak what they know to be true, so that those who are really the people at the forefront of all of this aren't standing alone. I mean, it's like Jason talks about when he's out there fighting or standing up for truth or what is true. We can't just sit there watching him. We have to stand with him. And I think this is why, in some ways, it's so heartening that the documentary's come out and there's been so many viewers and so many people are reposting it on social media and making comments about it and really, really pushing it, because there's such a strong feeling now of a building of people coming together and people just not standing for this, none of it. You know, like there was that video on YouTube recently about people in Germany rising up and saying, no, we're not going to be stuck inside. We refuse to be quarantined. You know, and I think it takes a movement of many to make something happen.
Yeah, talking about quarantine, we live in a little town and people are so active here, they just love to go outside.
It was like yesterday I broke the law. I went and sat in the park for an hour because it was sunny. You know, and you kind of think, oh, I'm breaking the law doing this. It's insane.
And it's good to see that the movie like this coming out at this times, right? When people are stuck inside and they can actually go and watch it. So that's great.
I was thinking about that too. It was like the length is good. It's only a little bit over an hour. It's like people definitely have enough time to sit down and watch it in full.
But it's definitely worth digging into the other movie that you suggested for Cabal, because it does give you a bit more details and it definitely dips down a little bit more. So I would definitely recommend that movie too.
And I think it's helpful that not only this documentary, but also the series, The Cabal by Janet Osabard, are presented in very rational, researched ways, because there are some videos out there that might be talking about the same thing, but they come across as slightly crazy because they aren't presented in such a way to come across as reasonable, inverted commas. I don't mean reasonable as in easy to digest or anything like that, but just thought out, structured, measured, because some people who like to dismiss all of this as conspiracy theory, which again was interesting that they touched on that in the documentary about the fact that that was invented by the CIA back to discount or discredit all the people who had ideas about JFK's assassination. But that's really latched on. So there's very much there seems to be very much people who believe in the truth, in inverted commas, and those people believe that the rest of us are conspiracy theorists. And it's a phrase that's really thrown around, and something that doesn't help really the conspiracy theory dismissal is people who aren't finding out the facts for themselves, or who aren't researching or properly checking things, who might just say things that are unfounded, and because they're unfounded or they're not researched or they're not based on something that they have a depth of knowledge about. And I'm not criticizing them for this, but it's easier to dismiss people who are just saying things that are kind of pat phrases, so I think that's why it's important for all of us to do the research, to think for ourselves, to really follow those trails, go down the rabbit hole fully instead of just tipping your foot in and coming out again. Because people are going to question, and when they question, you need to be firm in what you know is true rather than kind of fold at the first question.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that can be challenging sometimes, because it's like, what do people take as valid research? It's like people could look at like Fall of the Cabal and be like, yeah, like someone just whatever, right? So it depends on, I guess, how deep you want to go, how much like concrete research you want to do. There's probably some good resources like Corey's Digs. She does really, really good research. So if you ever want to do research on something, she actually has resources that she put together that people can use to research. So I can put a link to her site as well down in the comments on YouTube or the description, wherever we want to put it.
Yeah, that would be good as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. That would be useful for sure, because it's good for people to just also go and do a bit of research on their own, right? Not just, it's easy to watch a documentary. People put it together for you, but I think once you start digging yourself, then you might get something out of it, and it connects those dots. That's what they're talking in documentary. When you watch, it's still not the same, but when you start doing it, start researching, then those little dots will eventually connect.
Yeah, and it's great to have that starting point for people who are starting, just curious or wanting to know more. This documentary is so valuable that way. And it's funny and interesting how some of the makers of it have been posting on social media, and they're saying that, they're up to 5 million, probably 6 or 7 by now, I'd imagine, viewers. And because it's so popular, it's got a life of its own. There's this mass pushback against it. Like Liz was saying, that people are just going insane at the moment trying to discredit her on news channels and social media. And there's all these tricks to it. Like one of the things she was saying is that they're reporting on her, but deliberately spelling her name wrong, so it doesn't come up in searches for, her lawyers or whatever to find. And all these kind of underground, insidious ways of discrediting somebody,
That is interesting. Yeah, because there was something that came up with them doing FOIA requests, the Freedom of Information Act requests. So there's certain documents that, are now made public, and you can search through them, and there are tons of things misspelled, so you can't find it. Because when you fill out the FOIA request, it's for a specific thing. So if you search for like James Comey and you're asking for a request with all the documents with his name in it, if it's not spelled the same way you request it, you're not going to get it back. And they found many examples of it with many different names spelled incorrectly, but made to look proper. So instead of the M, it's the N and an R, or an R and an N to look like an M. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very tricky.
Yeah. But I think going back to the shock of it, because I remember the first real introduction I had to all of this was the Janet Ossabard series. And she speaks about it in that series too, about how you'll go through the different stages almost, and you go through, it's almost like information overload. I think there's a technical term for it, I forget what it is, where your mind just shuts down and doesn't want to believe it because it can't be true. So I think in some ways it does take time for all of this to filter through and to be accepted as truth, because it is so shocking. I mean, some of the things, without going too in depth with them all, about them all here, but some of the things that are coming to light are so unbelievably shocking, and they're things that humans are programmed to, or maybe by nature would react very angrily about. So like, for example, the topic of children, harm being done to children, like he speaks about in the documentary. At the beginning of his journey, his view was that if he saw somebody harming a child in front of him, he'd kill them. So to accept that there's so much damage and harm being done to children that is beyond belief takes a while to accept, because the mind really just rebels against that, just pushes it away, because our natural reaction as humans is, well, not everyone, but for most of us, is no, absolutely. If you saw a child being damaged or hurt or even smacked in front of you, you'd say something or you'd do something. But the thought that these children are used for so much worse is just, it stretches the mind beyond what most people would want to think of.
Yeah, I think some people will also have an issue when things are coming out with the fact that a lot of people do know about this, and it's like, well, why haven't you done anything about it? Like, I think there might be anger directed at those people, but I feel like there are people who have known about this for a long time, people who have been called conspiracy theorists for decades, always looking into this. So I think to a certain level, maybe those people are a little desensitized to it just because they're so aware of the information. Not saying that that's like their excuse for not doing anything about it, but I'm glad that there are those people there, because they'll be the ones who are stabilizing kind of the anger from everybody else, because we can't just throw everything into chaos. Like, there has to be some sort of order to the way that things are being taken care of, in my mind. So I'm not sure entirely what I was trying to get across there, but
no, you're right. Yeah, it's important to have that balance. So that's why it is good to have those people, like you say, who've known about this for years, and then the people have known about it for months, and people have known about it for weeks. So as new people find out about it, those that have known about it for a long time and have adjusted can hold that center, can hold the stability, because there needs to be a kind of foundational grounding to it all, because otherwise it's like with mass riots, it can just spark into this wildfire of violence and anger and destruction.
Right.
So it's important that something's actually done, rather than being people just hitting out.
Yes, that's another good reason about the series that you had mentioned, because it starts talking about the plan and what is in place to correct what has been going on for so long.
Yeah.
But I feel with some people, even when it's hopeful at some point will come out in the real news, in the real media, I still feel that they will push it away and won't accept it, and it will really take a long time to sink in before the history books will be rewritten again and it will become wildly accepted fact again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's like he talks about in the documentary. It's like Plato's analogy of the cave. It's kind of what you're used to. So all of us are so used to seeing the shadows across the wall of the cave and thinking that's reality. But then, when you're turned around and you walk out of the cave and you see things you've never knew existed before, like you see the sun for the first time, or you see the actual thing that you saw the shadow of, your mind and your vision and your eyes can't even compute as to what they are. It takes that adjustment period. So I think people do react in different ways. There is that whole thing about, I can't remember the steps, but when something happens, you go through the denial, then you go through the whatever it is, and then you come to acceptance. And so it takes stages for people to to get to that point, if they get to that point at all. Some people want to stay in the cave and they want to keep staring at the wall because that's what they know. And that's fine, that's their choice, it's everyone's choice. But I'm just glad that there's this information out there to be able to see, to be able to learn more, to be able to educate myself about, and in whatever way you can, do something about it, whatever way I can do something about it, because it's just so important that this information comes out.
Yeah, I tend to talk a lot about people not accepting it as truth, and a good example is my husband. I let him watch full Cabal and he just wouldn't believe it. He just tells me, come on, use your mind, check the facts. Where is all of this coming from? It's all conspiracy. It's not true. How can you believe in this? So no matter what, he just would not believe in any of this. Just some people would deny. And even if I let him watch the other movie, it's going to be the same story. So I kind of gave up and decided, well, hopefully the time will come and then it will become available and everyone will know about it.
Yeah, what I kind of found compelling about this one in particular was that the guy Mike, the stuntman, right, who started talking at the beginning, he didn't want to believe it, but he started piecing things together after he had that conversation with his pelvic floor therapist and was like, oh man, like I remember seeing some stuff and hearing some stuff and this kind of makes sense. Yeah. And I've actually had conversations with some people too who, don't want to believe it as well. And I was like, hey, yeah, like I'm not believing it because I want to believe it. Who wants to believe that this is happening? I don't think anybody wants this to be happening.
And the arguments we have, he's always like, don't you see it's all about the views? Don't you see that all they want to do is to get the views? They can put any kind of information out there. Use your critical thinking.
But do you think if it got to the point where it was actually shown on mainstream news, he would believe it because it was on the mainstream news, just purely for that fact?
Probably, yes, because it's nothing to do with the clicks, how many clicks people are going to get. And it's nothing to do that they just want to put it out for people to watch. And, somehow being financially supported by getting lots of views.
It's funny though, because that is the way the news works, based on views. Like that's how cable works.
Yeah, but main media, they don't care about views, right? It's only media
I think they do. I'm pretty sure the mainstream news networks, they care about how many viewers they get. It's a big thing. That's why they covered Trump so much, because they're like, okay, yeah, we can talk about this. People will watch. Yeah, Project Veritas did a good thing on that. Yeah.
But it's on TV. How do they still look at the views on the TV? Okay. I didn't know that.
I mean, do you remember when Diana was alive, all the papers, maybe you didn't hear about it so much, but in the UK, all the papers would just regularly put a photo of her on the front because they knew that they would sell that way. It's very much, it's massive manipulation. I mean, even in that form, but we will all buy it, so with Diana being on the front page of every single newspaper pretty much every day, people felt that they got to know her and they saw the story that was portrayed about her. Nobody actually knew her, but because of the regularity that it was put out there, people felt that she was a friend or somebody they got to know or somebody they had affinity with. So that's another reason why it's so important that these things just keep getting shown and keep getting out there, because the more people see them, the more it sinks in, whether it's subconsciously or otherwise, until people start opening up to the possibility that it might be true. So like with your husband, he watched that once and he's very, very anti it. But then let's say another source that he respects, say, mentions it or has a video or some kind of information about it, he might then start thinking, well, maybe there's something to this. And then if another source shows it or he hears about it in another way, it might be a very, very gradual breakdown for him, breakdown of the defenses. But I think his reaction is quite typical, I'd say, particularly as a parent, because as a parent, you obviously want to protect your children. So anything that's so damaging to children, and if your mind is not as open, say, as yours, his reaction is going to be to absolutely dismiss it because he doesn't want to accept it as true. And the easy way to do that is to tell you that you're crazy, because then it's not got anything to do with him, it's all you.
Mm-hmm. But it's kind of interesting. I researched a little bit on the subject, how many couples are actually going into not separation, but having a true problem because one part is really looking into Q and searching all the Q posts and try to investigate whether they're true or not. And the other side thinking what's going on and completely on the other side. So it seems to be becoming quite a bit of a problem. I've definitely read several articles where people were talking about it, that there is that split between the two of them and split in beliefs. And it's, even though they try to dismiss it and say that, well, it doesn't really, it's not important, there's other things that hold us together. But that whole fact that there is a split in the views and beliefs and they're constantly coming up, it's definitely challenging.
I bet it is. It must be. Because it's such a fundamental thing that you disagree on. It's not like, you like chocolate ice cream, he doesn't, who cares?
Yeah, this is looking at how the world works or how we believe the world works. So it's not necessarily a small thing. It is something that you can kind of forget about, though, because it's not in the mainstream. So you can kind of go about your daily life. I mean, it's a little bit more difficult now being in quarantine, but pretty much typically you could just go along with your daily life and kind of forget about it a little bit.
At the same time, it colours everything, doesn't it, though? In that when they talk about, for example, celebrities and some of the cults and beliefs and... Sorry, my cat's joining in. Yes, you're right. Very good point. Like when they're talking about celebrities and some of the things they do and some of the rites of passage they have to go through and some of the rules they have to follow, I can't look at them the same way. So some celebrities say that I might have really liked the films that they did a few years ago. I mean, now when I see them, I'm like, oh God, it makes me feel like I want to vomit,
I actually stopped watching any movies for a long time now. I haven't had TV for 20 years. And so none of this really kind of was, I mean, I still have, of course, YouTube and I still have my phone. So, but I haven't watched any of the Hollywood movies for, I would say, good 3 years now. Probably not a single one.
That's really good. Because I'm kind of curious. I haven't watched a film for a while, but I'm curious to watch one just to see if I can see all the programming and manipulation that would have passed me by before. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but I'd be curious to see.
Well, if you're open to it, then I think it would be a cool exercise and something maybe we could share with the people who are listening, because I was interested in that, because Louise had shared an experience that she had when she went to go see the new Lion King. So I had actually asked her, I was like, would you mind talking to me about that? And she's like, no, I don't even want to. Like, she just really didn't want to. Like, that's how bad it was, I guess. But I'd like to hear from someone who can really see, what they see. I haven't watched the film, but I feel like I'm in a place where I might just watch it and I still wouldn't see it, and then it would still get into my subconscious somewhere. So I'm just like, maybe better not. Yeah.
That could be interesting, though, if we all watched the same film. Maybe it's a suggestion, and we get together and talk about it.
I mean, we're doing that now, kind of, aren't we?
And then we could talk about specifics, like, in this scene that happened, did you see the symbolism there and where they use this? And
there's some other movies, like documentaries out there, that talk about that it used to be well-known history, that there were human sacrifices, and it goes back to Rome and how it was a common knowledge, and then the whole history got rewritten and it's no longer common knowledge. People think, no, that's never happened, and there is a bunch of cover-ups. So it's kind of interesting to see all of that.
Yeah, I think all of this has been going on for eons and eons. And again, it's interesting how, again, it's the media, isn't it? In a sense that rewrites history. Everything can be slanted. It's a great PR exercise. Everything can be shown to be in a different light. And the more it's said, the more it's accepted into the collective consciousness. So entire wars and decades and eras can be rewritten. And then it becomes believed by all the generations that follow.
Yeah, so it's important to do your own research.
Yeah, that can be tough too, though, knowing where to research, right? Because people could be like, oh, well, I have this textbook, so of course this is correct. That's where it comes back to, like, I guess really feeling within yourself when you're taking in the information, like, does this resonate as true to me? Like, does this feel like it holds some weight?
Yeah, and to question the sources as well, because there are some sources that people will believe without question. So for some people, it's if it's written in a book, it must be true, and for other people, it's if it's on the news, it must be true, or for other people, it's my friend Joe says it, therefore it must be true. So it's about questioning all the sources that you get information from, and not just assuming that they're right or wrong. So I think it's important as well to have that balance, because there's always that side of things that can turn into massively hysterical or explosively reactive because there can be a lack of balance. So I think when taking information in or researching things, read the things that you know are not true as well, just to find out what they're saying, or watch things that you know are by people who are putting a slant on things, just to see if you can see it and find out what's being said there as well. Because I think it can be easy sometimes to go into that cocoon of, oh, I just follow this and I watch this and I believe this, without knowing what's going on outside of that. So it's important to have the big picture and be informed. I mean, it's like sometimes you'll see on Facebook, if people say things about whatever it might be, Trump or whatever is happening, a response often is, oh, you're just a conservative, or oh, you're right wing. There's that label that gets put on you. And like Karatima always says, she put on a comment on Facebook the other day. She said, well, no, there are no wings. Both wings belong to the same bird. And that's just such a perfect way of looking at it, because you need to see the whole bird. You can't just focus on the one wing because it's just doing a part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to have to go in a minute.
Yeah.
Well, it was a nice discussion. I really enjoyed it. So thank you everyone for watching.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for getting up so early.
Well, it was important to discuss the movie. Okay, thank you.
Bye.